Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic. Let's do it. What's your creepiest experience? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was like 15, I was home alone. My bedroom was in the basement. I heard someone come in and thought it was my mom. She usually announces herself when she gets home, so I yelled hello, but no one responded. I started getting freaked out because I knew my mom would answer me, so I ran to hide under the stairs, difficult to do so in this place, and then I heard footsteps coming down the stairs slowly. I could see through the wooden stairs. These black boots walked down and stood there for a minute. I covered my mouth to not make any sounds, and then the person walked back upstairs and left. I stayed under the stairs for a good hour scared. Came out and called the cops, but we didn't have any security cameras, and all I saw were black boots. Never figured out who it was or why that happened. In my late 20s, I shared a third-floor flat with two other housemates. We each had our own bedroom. I was asleep, alone, naked in my bed. My housemates were not home. Awakened to a flashlight in my eyes. 3 officers, at least they were in uniform, staring. They had reports of a prowler at this address. I told them I had not called, that I was the only one home, and to please stop shining the flashlight in my eyes and leave. I didn't get out of bed because I was naked. They left. In the morning, I called the police to verify that 3 officers had been at my home and was told that no, there was no report of officers being dispatched to my address. Changed the locks after that and put curtains in all the windows. One time I got followed home from a friend's house by a creepy guy. It was like 1:30 a.m. in New York City. He followed me for like 8 blocks, and I even doubled back to make sure we weren't just walking in the same direction. I walked to the campus security office instead of my dorm, and as soon as I approached the door, I looked back, and he immediately turned 180 degrees and walked straight off campus and up the street. Super freaking creepy. I was followed home by a guy while driving. I noticed him behind me and took 4 left turns. Still behind me. I didn't go home and instead drove to a very local park with several bars across the street. I kept a buck knife in the pocket of my driver's side door. I parked, got out with the knife still in its sheath, and stared at him as he slowed to a stop behind where I parked, blocking traffic. I got his license plate number memorized. He eventually drove on. I put the knife in my back pocket and went into a bar, sat down, and called the police. It turns out they knew the guy. He got off on making people feel nervous by following them, but was ultimately harmless. They couldn't really do anything about it. Still double-checked to make sure my door was locked each night for the next couple of weeks. If he even ends up in court for anything, I will testify. My phone was dead and it was very late. I noticed the only other person around had gotten on the same train I did. I felt strange and got off at a different stop only to realize they were trailing me. I finally made it above ground, surprise. No one was around but the creep. I saw a taxi with their lights off. I pretended I was on the phone with the cab. I frantically pulled the back door with tears in my eyes, and the driver reluctantly and probably confused let me in. He was waiting for his wife. I saw the creep guy make a sharp turn, and I started sobbing because I felt something was very wrong, and I had narrowly distanced myself from a potentially scary situation. The cabbie's wife got in the front seat, also confused, and I explained what had happened. In the kindness of their hearts, they insisted on giving me a ride home. I couldn't have been more grateful. My now wife and I were walking in a park, and mid-sentence I got the strongest feeling of dread I've ever felt from behind me. My wife sensed it from a blue truck that pulled up right by us. A heavy-set white guy with a huge afro gets out, along with his 2 German shepherds. There was just the darkest, creepy feeling of evil from him. He was talking to himself. We continued to walk away around the park. We got around to the far side and sat on a bench. The guy with his dogs came near us. He was definitely trying to be close without actually making eye contact or talking. He was talking loudly to himself, rambling about current political events and figures, but making no sense. After he had come close to us a third time, we agreed to get the fuck out of there. We were about 4 blocks from my place, and we started walking. Most of the way there, he passes us in his truck and turns around again. When we got to our place, we dove inside and I kept a watch. Sure enough, he drives by, but he didn't see me or where we lived. Sleep paralysis. The demon was stalking back and forth at the end of the bed, just out of sight. If you've been through this, you know what I mean. I've been through it a few times, so I just keep myself calm and waited for it to end. I knew it wasn't real and that it would be fine. But here's the messed up part. My cat was lying on my chest, and her head was turning back and forth to follow the thing's movement. My husband and I lived in a house that had floor-to-ceiling windows in the master bedroom. The back of the house opens up to a large area of open woodland around a rock quarry and golf course. One night we were sound asleep and woke up to what sounded like a child crying, then screaming, like they were being tortured right outside our room. God, the sound was awful. It scared the hell out of both of us. My husband was going to call the cops, tell them someone was killing a kid, get his gun out, and everything. We got up, ran to the window, and threw open the curtains. 2 raccoons having sex. The light from the room lit up. They looked at us, we looked at them, deer in the headlights, then for amorous couples before going to bed. I was walking back to my dorm from class, and a guy started following me. He was keeping pace with me and started getting really close. My dorm wasn't far, so I just started running. He chased. I'm so lucky that there were people smoking on my porch. They saw me coming and scanned their key and opened the door for me, then slammed it shut on him. I absolutely would have no idea how to time to scan my key card and open the door myself. The man started punching the door to our dorm. Luckily, the building had strong windows. Police found him later that night breaking into a different building. I still don't know what would have happened if that guy had caught me. You know, this in some way reminded me of a conversation I had this morning with one of my clients. We were actually hiking in the woods, and they talked about how, I have a daughter, and I envision a place where I shouldn't feel nervous for her when she's older, to just go for a hike or a run in the woods. But you hear such horrible stories, and it really gives caution or just makes you think, and that sucks. Sorry. When I was 16, I was stalked by a 32-year-old man. My friends thought I should be flattered, but then it got really creepy because he would be showing up at my house. He would show up at my school. He would call the radio station and dedicate songs to me. And people would call me and tell me about it. He stood outside the window of my parents' house and just stared up at my room. I made my parents aware of this, but they told me it was my fault and that I was trying to lead him on or something. I spent the last 2 years of high school just terrified. I moved right after graduation and never looked back. I don't know what happened to him, but I'm sure he's in jail if there's any justice in this world. I'm sure I'm not the only woman he did this to. Living through what ended up being the main plot device in the movie Final Destination 2, except this happened around 1980. I was 5 and we were on our way home from visiting my grandparents, stuck behind a big logging truck in heavy rain. Somehow, I felt like something really bad was going to happen, and I managed to make myself have an asthma attack. We pulled over and my mom helped me calm down, and the attack passed. We got back on the road, and several miles up, there was a major accident. The car that had been behind us was destroyed. A gory scene. In recent years, I've tried looking up information on the wreck, always feeling like I bore responsibility for the deaths of the people in the wreck. When I saw Final Destination 2, it really freaked me out. I, 26 female, once was in a fender bender, and after everything was taken care of with the other person in terms of insurance, he left, and I waited on the side of the road for my parents to meet and pick me up. As I'm waiting, a car with 2 men pulled up behind my car. and the passenger asked if I was mine and if I needed help. I told him no and had help on the way, but thanks anyway. The passenger asked if I was sure, and I told him yes, thanks anyway. Up until then, I thought they were just trying to be good Samaritans, but then they got persistent and the passenger said, "No, we're going to help you." He started to get out of the car, and I never hopped into my car so fast before in my life. As I got into the driver's seat, they pulled the car around to the side and angled it so I couldn't get to the road and began cursing at me and asking what was wrong with me. As soon as I turned my car on, they drove off. Even if it was nothing, my red flags were waving, and when I looked at the driver and how he was glaring back at me, the feeling of my heart dropping to my stomach happened and flight or fight kicked in. While sick with a high fever, I woke to see my room full of people I did not recognize. They were all reaching out to me, some dressed in modern clothing while others wore more Victorian or medieval. There was no fear, but no one was being awestruck. After what seemed like an hour, their look turned to confusion, and each whispering to the other while they were walking the opposite direction of me. It's so weird in a fog. No one ever said a word to me. 35 years later, I still get weird reminders of that hallucination or whatever you can call it. This one's mild compared to the others, but one time when I was in a Starbucks, I was overwhelmed with this sense that there was what I can only describe as a dark aura. I felt a deep instinctual fear in my body to the point where I had to leave. Always being curious, I had to look at the other patrons, and everyone seemed like chill, normal people. I still have no idea what that was, and no, not the dark aura or late-stage capitalism, lol. Trigger warning, kidnapping. I was 15 in a bathroom by myself in North Dakota. I heard the bathroom door open and someone comes in. The footsteps were heavy. I wasn't nervous at first because there were multiple stalls in the facility. Then I glimpsed the feet walking toward my stall. They were large, scuffled work boots. I knew right away they were men's feet. I froze in instinctual fear, pulling my feet up to my chest on the toilet. He stood directly in front of the door and began rattling it with his fist, not saying a word. In that moment, I knew he wasn't sure there was anything except what was behind my door. I couldn't even scream, I was so scared. I just thought about how sad my family would be if I never came back out of the bathroom to the car in the lot. Then my saving grace. An older woman came bustling into the bathroom and yelled at the man to get the hell out of here. I was driving down a road in the suburbs of Denver, Lakewood once. It was around 2 a.m., so not many cars or other people were out. I noticed the light swinging in the road a few blocks ahead. I slowed down, thinking it was a warning of some sort or someone in the road. I was just letting my truck crawl up the street slowly. The light started to move toward me, but the movement was odd. It wasn't like someone walking or holding a light to see. The movements were erratic and jumpy. As the light got closer, I noticed it stopped just outside of a streetlight. It appeared to be on a sidewalk now, so I noticed it, and speed up to go around it because I was feeling sketched out. Just before I entered the light from the street light, where the light was on the opposite side of me, both the light and street light go out at the same time. It startled me, so I hit my brakes and stopped. I then noticed movement out of my left window and turned to look with my heart pumping out of my chest. Just as I look to the side, I see a girl, maybe 14 or 18, I don't know, standing right outside my truck window. She doesn't seem distraught or upset at all. She just says, "You want to let me in?" to me through my window. I thought it was odd how clearly I heard her through a rolled-up window with my music going. I was frozen and puzzled, just looking at her with a series of question marks in my head. Then I noticed her eyes were very dark, more than brown eyes, and straight about a block. I couldn't see any white in them. It sent shivers through me. I just hit the gas and drove around a block. I looked in my rearview mirror to see her skipping down the street in bare feet. Most puzzling interaction of my life so far. I was living with my mom in a 100-year-old house that everyone in the neighborhood claimed was haunted. My abusive boyfriend at the time also stayed a few nights with me. Once in the middle of the night, he woke up and said, "Something is wrong. I feel something is watching me. Something is here." He was freaked out. That is very out of character for him. He was the definition of toxic masculinity. He could never admit weakness or anything close. As soon as I sat up, a piece of the drywall from my bedroom ceiling broke off and fell on his head. It wasn't big enough to hurt him, just enough to scare the hell out of both of us and cause us to sleep with the lights on for a few weeks. Another time, he stayed over because my mom went on a vacation for a few weeks. Before we went to bed, her first night gone, we made sure every window and door were locked. We checked it twice because it was a decent-sized house. Early the next morning, we drove up to the dogs barking their heads off like anywhere in the house because there's zero carpet, horrible insulation, and the door is just loud as hell. The steps to my bedroom are also 6 feet from the door, and there's no door in my bedroom. Then we hear footsteps go through the house to the back. I thought it was my brother and just didn't realize he had a key or something. I go downstairs 2 minutes later, and the front door is still locked. The chain is on, the fan in the dining room in the middle of the house are wrapped around the lights, and the back door is completely wide open. I called my brother, and he said it wasn't him. Still have no idea what it was. I lived in that house for 5 years and only experienced those two things. I had a late-night college class in the financial district of San Francisco for 1 semester. We didn't get out till 10:30 p.m., sometimes later. I was outside waiting for the bus to take me home. Well-lit area, shops closing down for the night, including the Starbucks across the street from me. Had a man in a minivan pull up and park 1 car length down from me, get out, and start to smoke a cigarette while he circled his car. When he was done with the coffee, he asked me if I wanted to go for some coffee with him. I looked at that closed Starbucks and then back at him and said, "No thanks." And he said, "Are you sure?" In this really weird tone, I confirmed, and so he got back in his van and sat there until my bus picked up. The whole vibe was creepy. Felt very trafficked. Yeesh.